Hands up! You are trespassing on private community property. The piercing command cut through the serene afternoon like shattered glass. My eyes caught the metallic glint first, then the unmistakable outline of a handgun aimed straight at my daughter, Emily. A chill ran down my spine. It was Carol, the self-proclaimed queen of our lakeside enclave, strapped into a tactical vest far too tight, topped with a cheap security hat that looked like it came from a costume store. The absurdity of her outfit couldn't hide the very real danger she posed. Emily, calm as ever, didn't flinch. She stood tall, arms relaxed at her sides, her expression unreadable but filled with quiet disapproval. "Ma'am," she said, voice level and unwavering, "you need to put that weapon down right now." Carol erupted into a high-pitched, manic laugh. "I'm making a citizen's arrest. This is my jurisdiction," she screeched. What she didn't know, in that moment of delusional bravado, was that she was pointing her gun directly at the newly elected county sheriff. Her reign of terror, it seemed, was about to end spectacularly. If you're curious how we dismantled her little kingdom, drop a comment with where you're watching from and brace yourself for the story. For my wife Sarah and me, owning a lake house had been a dream for over 2 decades. Nothing lavish, just a cozy retreat with a solid dock, a porch perfect for morning coffee, and water deep enough for the grandkids to play in safely. As a retired civil engineer, I envisioned small projects, reinforcing the dock, building a fire pit, maybe even a planter box or two. Our idea of paradise was manageable, peaceful, and serene. After years of hunting, we found it, a slightly rustic, 2-bedroom cabin tucked into a quiet cove on Silver Lake. The lot was one of the few platted before the main development began, located half a mile down the shore. This seemingly minor detail would soon become our most powerful advantage in the suburban battlefield ahead. We closed the sale, spent a few weeks on light renovations, and moved in just as spring thawed the lake. Those first days were magical. Loons returned to the water, sunlight flickered through the pines, and the hardest choice of the day was whether to fish from the dock or the canoe. Life felt exactly as we'd imagined, until Carol arrived. She came on a Saturday morning in a golf cart modified to resemble a mini police cruiser, complete with a blinking yellow light. She parked it with exaggerated flair at the end of our driveway and strode onto the lawn like a military commander surveying the ranks. Carol was in her late 50s, with a severe haircut, mirrored wraparound sunglasses, and an aura of absolute authority. A clipboard in hand, she radiated dominance. "Welcome to the Silver Lake Community Association," she announced, not as a greeting, but as a decree. "I'm Carol Peters, president." I extended my hand in greeting, but she ignored it. "We're Frank and Sarah," I said, trying to sound friendly. "So happy to be here." Carol gave a brief evaluating nod, her gaze sweeping over the new porch swing, the freshly painted shutters, and a small stack of lumber I'd planned to use for a planter box. "I'm sure you are," she said flatly, her tone hinting we'd passed some imaginary test. "Here's your welcome packet and a copy of the association bylaws. Our dues are $500 a year, due by the 1st of next month. That covers dock upkeep, winter plowing, and community security patrol." She tapped her ridiculous golf cart with the clipboard. "I personally oversee this." Sarah, ever the diplomat, smiled warmly. "Oh, that's thoughtful of you, Carol. We actually weren't aware there was an HOA. The realtor never mentioned it. And it wasn't in our closing papers." For a fleeting second, the veneer of civic responsibility cracked. Her eyes hardened, a possessive, almost territorial gleam flashing through. And just like that, our idyllic lakeside life collided head-on with the overbearing control of HOA Carol. "Well, of course there's an HOA," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "How else would we maintain the standards and value of our community? Some realtors just don't bother to do their homework. But don't worry, I'm here to get you sorted." She shoved a clipboard and a thick binder into my hands. "Inside," she said, "were all the rules. Lawn height, trash placement, approved paint colors, boat schedules, everything laid out clearly. We meet on the first Tuesday of every month. Attendance is strongly encouraged. I'm not opposed to HOAs in principle. I understand their purpose. But this felt different. The sense of immediate authority, the abrupt demand for payment, and the expectation that we fall in line before even meeting a single neighbor, all of it set off alarms. As a civil engineer, I live by plans, contracts, and legal frameworks. Something about Carol's approach was off. "Well," I said, taking the binder gingerly, "we'll review this thoroughly. Thank you for bringing it by." "Don't just review it," she snapped, her voice suddenly firm. "Sign the membership agreement in the back and send it with your check. New residents have a 30-day grace period, but I prefer to get everyone on board quickly. Avoids misunderstandings." With that, she climbed back into her tiny faux police cart, gave us a long, measured glare that felt more like a warning than a farewell, and sped down the dirt road, her single yellow light blinking with exaggerated authority. Sarah and I stood on our lawn, the binder feeling unnaturally heavy in my hands. "Well," Sarah said finally, breaking the silence, "she seems very dedicated." That evening I did what any engineer would. I investigated. The dining table was soon covered with our property survey, closing documents, and county tax maps. Our lot, along with the 4 surrounding parcels, was clearly defined. Pulling up the official records, I confirmed what we suspected. Our properties were established in 1978. The main Silver Lake development, the heart of the HOA, wasn't incorporated until 1991. Geographically close, yes, but legally, completely separate. Joining the HOA was voluntary for us. Carol's authority ended precisely at the property line of the newer development. The road in front of our cabin was a county-maintained access way, not a private community drive. Her jurisdiction was nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. I also pulled up the bylaws for her association. Standard stuff, mostly, but a few amendments were clearly her handiwork, granting the president an unusual level of unilateral power for fining and enforcement. The next day, Emily arrived with her husband and our 2 grandkids. Smart, capable, and unflinchingly confident, she had just been elected county sheriff, a crowning achievement after 10 years as a deputy. We hadn't publicized it online, respecting her preference for privacy, but the new reality was impossible to ignore. As we grilled burgers on the deck, I recounted our encounter with Carol. Emily listened carefully, her brow furrowing. "She has a fake police light on her golf cart," I said. Emily's lips twitched with a small smile. "A yellow one?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And she claims to run the security patrol." Emily shook her head, chuckling. "She is the security patrol, Dad? That's going to be a problem. You can't just slap flashing lights on a cart and start policing the neighborhood. Depending on the light and how she uses it, she could be dangerously close to impersonating an officer." "And her HOA is voluntary for us," I added. "We're not part of her development, so you're not joining?" she asked. "I don't see why we should," I replied. "We manage our own property. If we ever need road plowing, we can hire a private service. I'm not paying $500 a year to be told what color my shed can be." A week later, I mailed a polite, carefully worded letter to the P.O. box listed in Carol's binder. I explained that our lot wasn't part of the Silver Lake Community Association, and while we appreciated the offer, we respectfully declined to join. I wished her and the HOA well and expressed hope for friendly neighborly relations. 2 days later, the first salvo arrived. A crisp white envelope tucked under our windshield wiper contained a form letter, a notice of violation. Our offense? Unapproved landscaping materials, specifically a neat stack of cedar planks for a small planter project. The notice cited bylaw 7.4 of a contract we had never signed. All construction required approval from the Architectural Review Committee, which I later discovered was just Carol and a timid retiree named Gerald. The fine, $50, doubling every 7 days if unresolved. A handwritten note at the bottom read, "This is your only friendly warning." We do things by the book here. The absurdity was staggering. She was trying to enforce her private rules on non-members, a bowling league policing my golf ball choice level of ridiculous. I didn't reply. I simply moved the lumber into the garage, refusing to give her the satisfaction of an argument. Carol didn't operate on reason. Her fuel was pure entitlement. Within days, a second violation appeared, improper trash can placement. According to her rule book, receptacles could not be visible for more than 12 hours before pickup. Another $50 fine. It became clear this wasn't about rules. It was about submission. She couldn't tolerate a single property outside her control. I started a folder simply labeled Carol. Property survey, plat maps, county road designations, her binder, my letter, the violation notices, all carefully documented. I was preparing for the worst-case scenario. Soon, the harassment escalated. Carol's golf cart became a constant presence, parked across from our driveway, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, observing us like a hawk. Sarah tried diplomacy. One afternoon, seeing her stationed in her usual spot, she walked over with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Carol, you must be thirsty," she said with a warm smile. "Thought you might like something to drink." Carol didn't even glance up. "I'm on duty," she said flatly. "I do not accept beverages while on patrol." Sarah, ever patient, placed the drinks on the ground and returned to the house, shaking her head. The iced tea sat there for hours, condensation pooling around the glass, untouched, until Carol finally drove off. The message was clear. There would be no truce. The very reason we moved to Silver Lake, peace, was being poisoned. Friends visit. The next escalation happened right in the middle of my 60th birthday celebration. We had invited about 20 people, family, friends, and a few old colleagues. The grill was going, music played at a reasonable volume, and the afternoon sun bathed the lake in gold. Around 3 p.m., the familiar rumble of Carol's golf cart announced her arrival. She screeched to a stop, blocking the end of our driveway just as 2 friends were pulling in. Carol hopped out, clipboard in hand, planting herself squarely in front of their car. I walked down the deck to see what was happening. "Carol, can I help you with something?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "There's a noise violation in progress," she announced loudly, ensuring everyone on the deck could hear. "And you have an unauthorized number of vehicles. Bylaws state no more than 4 guest cars without prior notice to the association." My friend Dave, a gentle giant, leaned out of his car window. "Ma'am, we're just trying to park." "Is there a problem?" "I am the problem solver here," Carol declared, gesturing grandly. "This is a private community with rules. This is not some free-for-all party zone." The audacity was breathtaking. She was citing her HOA rules to my guests. I took a deep breath. "Carol, these are my friends. This is my property. You are not part of this gathering, and your rules don't apply here. You are also blocking a county-maintained road. Please move your vehicle." Her response was immediate and false. "And your loud music and excessive traffic are impacting the quality of life for our members." She gestured vaguely down the road, though the nearest member lived nearly a quarter-mile away, nowhere near our party. Emily, who had been watching quietly from the porch, started down the driveway. Dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, she looked like any other guest, but her calm, confident stride carried the authority she had earned. "Hi there," she said with a smile as she approached Carol. "I'm Emily. Is there a problem?" Carol sneered. "Another one?" she muttered under her breath. Then louder. "Your party violates multiple community standards. You need to disperse excess guests and lower the music immediately." "Which county ordinance are we violating?" Emily asked casually, her tone genuinely curious. Carol faltered. "It's not an ordinance. It's the community bylaws. They're legally binding." Emily nodded pleasantly. "Sure, for members of your association. But my parents aren't members. So I'm curious, what public law gives you the authority to block a public road or detain people?" The word detain hung in the air like a guillotine. Carol's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being questioned by someone calm, knowledgeable, and clearly unafraid. "You're a smart aleck, aren't you?" she spat. "Think you're above the rules? We'll see about that." She snapped a photo of Dave's license plate, scribbled furiously on her clipboard, and then, with a final glare, eased her cart just enough to let the car through. For the rest of the afternoon, she remained parked across the street, a silent, scowling sentinel. The incident cast a shadow over the celebration. Everyone talked about it. Dave and his wife kept apologizing, convinced they had somehow misstepped. I spent 20 minutes reassuring them that the crazy HOA lady had no real power here. After the guests left, Emily stayed behind to help clean up. "Dad," she said seriously, "this has escalated far beyond neighborly irritation. She's actively harassing you, blocking the road, trying to intimidate guests. That's illegal. Her delusion of authority is going to get her into trouble." I sighed and slid the Carol folder across the table. I had documented every interaction. Emily spent the next hour reviewing the files: violation notices, plat maps, county road designations, bylaws, correspondence. My engineering mindset had gathered the what. Emily, as sheriff, could see the how. She tapped the signature page of the bylaws. "Have you checked their corporate status with the state?" I admitted I hadn't. I had focused solely on property boundaries and the fact we weren't required to join. "I'll have my staff look it up on Monday," she said, "and I'll check with the county clerk about any authority she might claim over that road. I'm almost certain there's none, but it's worth confirming." She gave additional advice. "Install a security camera covering the driveway. If Carol steps onto your property, it must be recorded. If she blocks the road again, call the non-emergency line. Don't confront her directly. Keep a paper trail for the authorities." A week later, I had a high-definition camera installed. It felt overkill, almost laughable, turning our peaceful lake house into a surveillance zone. But Emily was right. Carol's behavior was escalating, and this was only the beginning. The next attack was subtler but insidious. We received a letter from the county zoning and planning office, an anonymous complaint alleging an unpermitted shoreline structure, our dock. The claim insisted it was newly built without permits or environmental review. In reality, our dock was 50 years old, grandfathered long before modern regulations, clearly documented in our deed and survey. Nonetheless, a formal complaint required a formal response. I spent an entire day digging up original construction receipts, referencing county code grandfather clauses, and drafting a 10-page letter with annotated diagrams and historical documents. 2 weeks later, the complaint was dismissed. The intent, however, was unmistakable. Carol, having failed at direct intimidation, was now weaponizing bureaucracy, trying to drown us in paperwork and legal fees. The curious part was her enablers. Most of her HOA neighbors were genuinely pleasant, apparently viewing her as a necessary nuisance. "Oh, that's just Carol," one Tom told me at the local hardware store. "She can be a little over the top, but you have to admit those flower beds at the entrance have never looked better," he said with a shrug, the universal gesture of resigned acceptance. Another neighbor, chatting with my wife at the grocery store, added, "She keeps the renters in line." Before she took charge, there were loud parties and chaos. People willingly traded some personal freedom for the order she imposed. They enabled her by staying quiet, paying their dues, and never questioning her increasingly erratic enforcement. Her husband, a quiet, perpetually startled man named Gary, was the ultimate enabler, often seen in the passenger seat of the patrol cart. He looked miserable as he handed Carol her clipboard or a bottle of water. He never spoke, never made eye contact. He was the silent accomplice, a passenger in her slow-motion implosion. What these neighbors failed to recognize was that the system Carol had built wasn't for their benefit. It existed entirely to serve her ego. It wasn't about community standards or property values. It was about power. And because we refused to bend the knee, she had escalated her behavior from petty tyranny to outright malicious harassment. But her escalation was a mistake. She had declared war on a civil engineer and the newly elected county sheriff. She was bringing a clipboard to a gunfight, unaware of the forces she had provoked. The pieces were lining up for her checkmate, and she didn't even see it coming. The anonymous complaint about our dock was the turning point. It shifted my mindset from passive defense to active offense. Carol had moved beyond simple harassment into what the law calls malicious prosecution, using legal systems to harm someone without merit. This was no longer a matter of notes, glares, or violation letters. This was serious. I called Emily as soon as the zoning letter arrived. Her response was swift and steely. "Okay, Dad, she's crossed a line. This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. Filing false reports with a government agency. That's a crime." The first critical piece of intelligence came from Emily's admin team. The Silver Lake Community Association, according to state records, had allowed its nonprofit corporate status to lapse 18 months ago. They hadn't filed the required annual paperwork or paid the nominal fees. Legally, the association didn't exist. It was a phantom entity. Every action Carol had taken, collecting dues, imposing fines, signing contracts, was technically unauthorized, executed under the name of a defunct corporation. "This is more than bookkeeping negligence," Emily said grimly. "It borders on fraud." I asked her about the dues she had collected. "Where's all that money going?" Emily's voice was grave. $64,000, Dad. That's the $64,000 question. She probably has a bank account in the association's name, but legally she has no authority to spend it. She could be commingling funds, or worse, treating the HOA account like her personal checking account. The pieces fell into place. The obsessive enforcement, the fixation on dues, the resistance to any oversight. It all pointed to someone protecting a secret cash flow. Our refusal to join wasn't just a slight to her ego. It was a threat to her personal income stream. We were a loose thread that could unravel her entire scheme. Finding an ally inside the system proved surprisingly easy. My methodical response to the zoning complaint had caught the attention of the county zoning officer, Maria. After the complaint was dismissed, I sent her a thank you email. On a hunch, I asked if anonymous complaints like ours were common. She replied cautiously but clearly. While she couldn't discuss specifics, her office had received an unusually high number of anonymous complaints from Silver Lake over the last 2 years, always targeting minor or fabricated infractions. These reports generated enormous administrative work but never resulted in actual violations. Maria was clearly fed up with Carol's games. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source, Gerald, the timid retiree who co-chaired the Architectural Review Committee. I ran into him at the post office one morning. He looked even more stressed than usual. Approaching carefully, I said, "Gerald, right?" "I'm Frank from the corner lot." He jumped, scanning nervously as if Carol might appear from behind a shelf. "Oh, hello," he mumbled, clutching a stack of letters. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry if my planter box caused any trouble," I said softly. "I didn't realize there were rules." Gerald's expression softened with what looked like guilt. "It wasn't trouble for me," he whispered. "I thought the planter box looked nice." He leaned in, glancing around again. "She just makes the rules up as she goes. There's supposed to be a vote for fines or new regulations, but we haven't had a legitimate meeting with a quorum in over a year. She just sends emails claiming things have passed." "And the dues? Road plowing? Dock maintenance?" I asked quietly. Gerald sighed, a deep, exhausted sound. "The plowing contract wasn't renewed last winter. She claimed to have found someone cheaper, but then we had that big February storm. Nobody came. We were snowed in for 3 days until Tom and I cleared the road ourselves. And the community dock? There's a rotten plank my wife nearly fell through. I told Carol 3 times. She said it was scheduled for repair. Bingo. Carol wasn't maintaining the community. She was exploiting it. Fees were collected for services never rendered. It was a textbook embezzlement scheme masked by a thin veneer of HOA authority. I thanked Gerald for his honesty and reassured him he had neighbors willing to support him. He gave a defeated nod and hurried away. I immediately called Emily. "It's embezzlement, Dad," she said. "She's using a dissolved corporation to collect money for services she isn't providing. This isn't just impersonating an officer. This is felony-level misconduct. Our plan was simple and precise. First, address the civil and legal violations. I drafted a letter not just as me, but framed as from concerned Silver Lake residents, even if that group was currently just me and the ghost of Gerald's courage. The letter was professional, thorough, and unassailable. It outlined the fact that the association's corporate status had lapsed. Any dues collected or enforcement actions under its name were void. The letter cited state statutes governing nonprofit corporations and detailed Carol's failures: the unfulfilled snowplow contract, the dangerously neglected dock, all contrasted sharply with the $500 annual dues collected from roughly 40 homes, disappearing into a financial void. The letter formally demanded a complete financial accounting and called for an immediate emergency meeting of all property owners to discuss the election of a new, legally recognized board. There were no threats, no accusations, just clear, undeniable facts and a reasonable request. I knew that once the other residents saw the truth laid bare on paper, it would be impossible for Carol to maintain her grip. The second part of the strategy involved law enforcement. Emily, in her official capacity as sheriff, couldn't open an investigation into her own father's neighbor without a conflict of interest, but she could respond to credible reports of criminal behavior, especially clear violations like brandishing a firearm or illegally blocking a public road. We anticipated Carol's response. Her entire world, the kingdom she had carefully constructed, was slipping away. People like her do not retreat when confronted. They lash out. We expected something drastic, a step over the final line from nuisance to outright crime. The security cameras were recording nonstop. My phone was always ready. All we needed to do was mail the letters and let the Queen unravel her own empire. I sent the certified letters to every single property owner using official county tax records. Copies went to Carol's P.O. box as well. The letters were timed to arrive on a Friday, allowing the weekend for neighbors to read, discuss, and begin talking among themselves. It was a carefully primed fuse, invisible yet ticking toward inevitable ignition. For 2 days, nothing happened. The lakefront was quiet, almost eerily so. I observed neighbors collecting their mail, pausing with furrowed brows, then glancing toward Carol's house. Cars rolled into driveways. Muted conversations buzzed across porches. The hive was stirring. The fuse was burning down, closer and closer to detonation. The explosion came on Sunday afternoon. The sun shone brightly, children shrieking and splashing at the end of our dock. Sarah was reading on the porch, and I was admiring the freshly completed planter boxes bursting with her favorite flowers. There was a fragile calm, the kind you notice just before a storm. Then came the roar. The angry hum of Carol's golf cart, barreling down the road at full speed. She ignored her usual surveillance spot, hurtling past our driveway and onto the edge of our lawn. Tires crushed a corner of Sarah's flower bed. She slammed the brakes and leapt from the cart before it fully stopped. The smug composure that usually cloaked her had vanished. Replaced by pure, unhinged rage, her face flushed deep red. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled copy of my letter. "You," she screamed, jabbing a trembling finger directly at me. "How dare you! After everything I've done for this community, this is slander, lies." I had prepared for confrontation, but the intensity of her fury still shocked me. I stepped off the porch, keeping a calm, measured stance between her and my family. "Carol," I said evenly, "you are trespassing. Please step off my property." "Your property!" she shrieked, voice cracking. "This is my community. I built it. I protect it. And you come here with your lies, trying to turn everyone against me." From down by the lake, I saw Emily looking up. She had heard the shouting. After a quick word with Mark, she started walking steadily up the lawn, towel wrapped around her waist, still in her swimsuit. She looked like any concerned family member, yet the aura of authority she carried was unmistakable. Carol didn't even notice her at first, too consumed with me. "You think you're clever with your letters and your statutes," Carol spat, "but you have no idea how things work here. I make the rules. I am the president." "You're president of a defunct corporation, Carol," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "The residents deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know where their $20,000 a year is going." The mention of the money sent another jolt through her. "It's all accounted for," she screamed. "Expenses, legal fees, insurance, things you couldn't possibly understand." At that moment, Emily reached the driveway. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, calm yet authoritative. Carol's eyes snapped toward her, blazing with fury. Seeing Emily, a member of the family she loathed, seemed to shatter the last thread of her composure. You're with him! You think you can ignore the rules?" "Ma'am," Emily said, taking a step forward and positioning herself slightly in front of me. "Please calm down. My children are right there. Don't put anyone at risk. Don't tell me to calm down." Carol shrieked, hysteria rising in her voice. "You people are ruining everything. You need to be taught a lesson." And then it happened. In one terrifying, surreal motion, she reached behind her back to a holster I hadn't even noticed on her absurd utility belt. She drew a black semi-automatic handgun, which gleamed ominously in the bright sunlight. My heart stopped. Time seemed to slow. Sarah gasped. Mark froze in place. The gun wasn't being waved loosely. It was aimed directly at Emily's chest, steady in her manic grip. "Hands up!" she screamed, eyes wide and unhinged. "You are trespassing on private community property. I am making a citizen's arrest." This was the moment we had feared. The line crossed from civil argument to potential tragedy. For a split second, pure panic gripped me. But Emily was magnificent. She didn't flinch. Her worried mom facade vanished. In its place stood the county sheriff, calm, controlled, and commanding. Emily squared her shoulders, standing tall, her expression settling into a mask of absolute professional control. She raised her hands slowly, deliberately, palms facing outward, the universal signal of non-aggression. "Ma'am," she began, her tone shedding any hint of neighborly courtesy. This was no longer a casual conversation. It was a command, a voice of authority that could halt chaos in its tracks. "My name is Emily Clark. I am the sheriff of this county. You are committing a felony, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I am ordering you, as a peace officer, to put your firearm on the ground immediately." Carol froze, her face a chaotic mix of fury and disbelief. She blinked as if trying to process the words, assuming it was some trick or bluff. You're just some little," she stammered, gesturing at Emily's towel-wrapped figure. "I am the authority here. I am President Carol Peters." Emily's reply was ice, her voice measured and deadly calm. "I am the sheriff," she repeated, each word solid and immovable, like granite. "And you, President Peters, are about 30 seconds from spending the rest of your life behind bars. This is your final warning. Put the weapon down." From down the road, the wail of approaching sirens began to swell, the first tangible reminder of real-world consequences. Carol's gaze flicked to the sound, then back to Emily, and finally to the gun in her hand. The weight of reality hit her like a sledgehammer. The weapon that had felt like an extension of her will now seemed impossibly heavy. Her arm quivered uncontrollably. I was just," she whimpered, her voice reduced to a feeble, apologetic whisper. "She was trespassing." "Drop it," Emily commanded, her tone sharp and unyielding. The gun slipped from Carol's grasp, clattering onto the asphalt with a heavy, undeniable thud. At that exact moment, 2 sheriff's patrol cars roared up behind Carol's ridiculous golf cart, lights flashing. Deputies exited with military precision, hands on holstered weapons, taking in the scene in a single, trained glance, the panicked woman, the gun on the ground, and their sheriff, standing calm and authoritative, barefoot in a towel. "Radiating command. Sheriff, are you okay?" one deputy called, voice taut with concern. "I'm fine," Emily replied, never removing her gaze from Carol. "Secure the weapon and take this individual into custody." The deputies moved like clockwork. One kicked the gun safely aside, bagging it as evidence, while the other approached Carol, now sobbing violently. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back," he instructed. "I'm the president." She wailed as though the title was some magical shield. But the deputy remained unmoved. "You have the right to remain silent," he said, snapping the handcuffs into place with a definitive click. As they led Carol to the patrol car, her eyes locked on me, pleading. I saw no malice there, only the shattered remnants of a deluded, fragile ego. Her kingdom of fantasy had been obliterated, quietly, irreversibly. The aftermath was immediate. Neighbors poured onto their porches and into their yards, drawn by sirens and commotion, murmuring in disbelief. They watched deputies secure the weapon, escort Carol, and stand by as Emily gave a measured statement. The illusion of Carol as Silver Lake's guardian had crumbled in seconds. Emily had ensured every step followed procedure, protecting herself from any perception of conflict of interest. She was both victim and law enforcement officer, acting with precision and impartiality. After Carol was transported to the county jail, Sergeant Miller, a senior officer familiar with Emily from her early career, "Came to take my statement, Frank," he said, shaking his head at the flattened corner of Sarah's flowers and the absurd cart. "I've heard some HOA stories, but this takes the cake. Is everyone okay?" "We are now," I replied, nodding toward my grandkids, safe on the porch. Thanks to Mark's quick 911 call. The high-definition security cameras recorded every moment. Carol driving onto the lawn, her tirade the moment she leveled the gun at Emily, and Emily's calm, commanding response. The footage was irrefutable. No ambiguity. No claims of self-defense could stand against this evidence. It was clear-cut. Carol was the aggressor. Criminal charges followed immediately. Multiple felonies, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and impersonating a public officer. The modified golf cart and makeshift uniform were cited as deliberate attempts to mimic law enforcement, violating state law. Misdemeanor charges were added for the false doc complaint and harassment. Gary, her long-suffering husband, posted bail the next day, depleting their savings. Bail terms were strict. No firearms, and a temporary restraining order barring her from coming within 500 feet of me, my family, or our property. Finally, peace returned to our lakeside corner. The oppressive shadow that had haunted our home was lifted, replaced by the blissful silence of a community free from tyranny. The relentless presence of Carol's surveillance golf cart was gone. The oppressive feeling of being constantly watched had vanished. We could finally tend the garden without glancing over our shoulders, host friends without tension, and simply enjoy life as it was meant to be, free, calm, and ordinary. Yet the triumph went beyond our personal relief. It was a victory for the entire neighborhood that had been quietly subjected to Carol's fabricated authority for far too long. A week later, my phone rang. It was Tom, the neighbor I'd met at the hardware store. His tone was transformed, trading the weary resignation of before for a determined, purposeful energy. "Frank," he said, "after reading your letter, a few of us got together. Gerald showed us everything, the fake meeting minutes, the ignored requests about maintenance. We feel like fools for letting it slide, but you weren't at fault," I assured him. "You weren't fools. You were simply trusting someone who abused that trust." "Well, we aren't being fooled anymore," he replied. "We consulted a lawyer. Your letter laid everything out perfectly. We are officially dissolving the old, defunct association and forming a new, legitimate one. Transparent, accountable, and guided by the members. We were hoping you'd help, maybe serve on the board as treasurer. Someone who actually understands numbers and balance sheets." I was flattered, but I politely declined formal involvement. Instead, I offered my expertise as an informal consultant, reviewing contracts, advising on infrastructure and community projects, and helping draft fair, enforceable bylaws that would preserve property values without infringing on individual freedoms. This arrangement suited everyone. The community gained experience and oversight, and I maintained my independence. A month later, the first official meeting of the new association took place in the town hall. Nearly every homeowner attended. The assembly voted to formally dissolve the old Phantom Association and transfer the remaining funds, what little was left after Carol's personal expenses, to a properly managed bank account. Tom was elected president. His first act was a good neighbor clause, requiring that all disputes begin with dialogue rather than fines and mandating mediation through the board rather than unilateral enforcement. It passed unanimously. The community also voted to issue a formal apology to our family for the harassment we had endured. Carol's legal troubles, however, were just beginning. Armed with my video footage and the financial evidence Gerald had provided, the district attorney moved decisively. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Carol's attorney counseled her to accept a plea deal. She pled guilty to felony menacing and misdemeanor fraudulent business practices. While she avoided incarceration due to her age and lack of prior offenses, she received 5 years of strict probation, a substantial fine, court-mandated psychological evaluation and anger management therapy, and 500 hours of community service. The crowning moment of justice, from my perspective, was the permanent injunction preventing her from ever serving on any board or fiduciary position in a homeowners association anywhere in the state. Her reign was conclusively ended. Socially, her downfall was equally thorough. Shunned by neighbors she once intimidated, burdened by legal costs, Carol and Gary sold their house months later, taking a financial loss. The property went to a young family eager to start their own chapter at the lake. I never saw Carol again. Emily, meanwhile, became something of a local legend. A new sheriff, she had faced down an armed neighbor in the most improbable circumstances. earning the respect and admiration of the community. Her calm decisiveness, courage, and commitment to justice had set the tone for what our neighborhood could be: safe, fair, and grounded in real law. For us, life at the lake finally returned to the vision we had moved here for. Coffee on the porch, fishing from our dock, watching grandchildren splash in the water, all without fear or interference. Occasionally, neighbors from the reformed HOA would stop by not to issue violations, but with cookies or invitations to potlucks. Together, we were building a real community, founded not on fear or coercion, but on mutual respect and shared values. My folder labeled Carol remains tucked in my desk. It serves as a reminder that peace is often won only after confronting storms head-on, and that no matter how much authority someone pretends to wield, no bully can withstand the combined force of careful planning, a sharp mind, and an unwavering commitment to what is right.